Did you ever think that a shot could change the world? If you're an American, you're probably thinking, yes, of course, the shot fired at Lexington and Concord, the shot around the world that started the American Revolution. And if you're not an American, you're probably thinking, Americans need to stop assuming everything is about themselves. Because there was a shot fired that changed the world, a shot far away from America's borders that set the whole world on fire. Hi, my name is Gabe Bauer, and this is Top Shelf History, where we combine great stories with great drinks. This is the shot that burned the world. It is the shot I have made for you today based on the infamous assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, that set the world on the path to World War I. It is made of 4 ingredients: Irish cream, yellow Chartreuse, Serbian Plum Brandy, and 151 Proof Rum. Now, for the modern person, the world before World War I may seem almost foreign. Monarchies still ruled, empires still reigned, and the shadows of medieval Europe still penetrated society. I mean, peasants were still a thing after all. And we're not talking about cultural figureheads here either. I mean, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Russia had active monarchs ruling their territories. You also had Mehmed V and Franz Joseph I, the rulers of the respective empires of the Ottomans and of the Austro-Hungarians. But it was this war, World War I, the war to end all wars, which ironically started a lot of wars after 1918, that led to the very institutions that once stood the test of centuries to melt away into the pages of history, leaving the world forever changed. So how did it happen? How did the world come to this moment? Well, for that answer, we have to look to the Balkans. Now, there was a lot of things going on in the Balkans in the early 1900s, specifically in the country of Serbia, in the capital of Belgrade. On the night of June 11th, 1903, nationalists had come together to oust the king that they so greatly hated, King Alexander Obrenović. They walked into the royal palace and they murdered him in the middle of the night, both him and his wife, Draga Masić. And they threw the bodies off the balcony into the yard so that everyone could see that the Obrenović line that once was supportive of the Ottoman Empire was now dead. And the next thing that they did is they looked to place the exiled King Peter Karađorđević back on the throne, who himself was a little bit more favorable to the nationalist sentiments of the Serbians. Now, what was the overall goal of the Serbians? Well, the Serbians wanted to have a greater unified Serbia, something to encompass all the southern Slavic peoples of the Balkans. It would actually make up what we would know today as post-World War II Yugoslavia. But at the time, Serbia was a lot smaller. They were in between several different powers. Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire practically surrounded them on all sides. And they knew that the only way for them to be able to break free and to get their unified Serbia would be from a Russian-backed campaign. Now, why Russia? Well, Russia was also Slavic, so from an ethnic background, they're more prone to help them. Not just that, but Russia was also one of the major powers in Europe at this time. So without backup from one of the major powers in Europe, there was no way that Serbia was able to get their nationalism that they were looking for. But a problem arose in their plans. Bosnia and Herzegovina, which had for years been under the occupation of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, had just been annexed and become part of the empire properly. Now, for the Serbians, this poses a major threat. It's easier to take out a governor that's just a puppet of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but it's different when now you have to deal with the emperor himself. Understanding this, the nationalists set about their new plan, forming a group known as the Black Hand, started by a Macedonian Serb and led by the infamous Dragutin Dmitrijević, who was also known as Apis. They set about their plan to hit the empire at its heart in their air. Learning that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was coming to Bosnia in June 28th, a major day for Serbian national pride. Now you may ask why. Well, June 28th, 1389 was the Battle of Kosovo, one of Serbia's biggest moments militarily in their history, where Prince Lazar, the Serbian king at the time, or monarch, part of the monarchy, took his soldiers and led them into battle against the Turkish Sultan Murat. And they both fought on the battlefield, and both monarchs died. Even though the Ottomans won, it was a day of great Serbian national pride. And for the Bosnian Serbs, they shared this pride as well. So learning that the object of their occupation was finally coming to their town, they weren't going to stand for it. Not on this day, June 28th. It's too important. So they set about their plan. And now, mind you, the Black Hand was meticulous in making sure that none of this information could be connected to Belgrade, that none of this information could really be found out in any other way. A lot of their communications was just through oral. They were talking their commands to each other. It wasn't written down. So a lot of this is difficult to piece together. But what we do have is that the plan went horribly. And I'll get more into that a little bit later. But let's focus on that fateful day just for a second. The assassins are ready. They see Franz Ferdinand in his car, in his motorcade, and they attack it. And sure enough, Gavrilo Princip, the young man of just barely 19 years old, fires 2 shots, pop, pop, and he kills both the Duchess Sophie and the Archduke. The first domino to fall in the epic tragedy that will lead Europe and the rest of the world onto war. Now, that is amazingly the short version of the story, trust me, the very, very short version of the story. But I didn't want to get too carried away, so let's get to our shot. Now, when I was thinking about this particular shot, I was thinking, how can I make something that looks like one of the battlefields that occurred as a result of that assassination? And my mind just went to the fields of Passchendaele with the mud and the mustard gas and all the fire, and it's terrifying, right? It's awful. So that's what we're going to be going for in look today. So for that, we will start off our drink with Irish cream. Now we're going to go about just a little bit of the way up. Don't want to go too high. I want to keep enough space going. I'm going to focus really hard on this because this is a layered drink. So it is important for me to make sure that it's layered well. Next, we're going to put in our yellow Chartreuse. Now this reminded me of the mustard gas. It's also French in origin. And one thing I think is important to remember is that the French got absolutely wrecked during World War I. The amount of men that they lost during that war was immense, almost as much or if not more than anybody else during the war. And it really destroyed the morale of not only the people itself, but also of the military. And that really kind of moved into World War II, as we saw after, Germany invaded again. So just important to remember there. The next part we're going to put in here is Serbian plum liquor. Now, I feel like this is necessary. After all, it was the Serbians that kind of started all of this. So we're going to do a little bit of Serbia for them. Now, I'm using Bistra Slivovic. It's a Serbian plum brandy. It's around 50% alcohol, so it's high proof. Really hits pretty hard, but it actually has a really nice fruity aftertaste, which is kind of refreshing. It's really nice to have. So we're going to float this on top as well. I'm going to be careful. We do this right. Now, I've found this at Total Wine & More. You can probably find it at any online retailer or maybe even at your local store. That's just where I found mine. And then lastly, we are going to put in 151 proof rum because, after all, this is the shot that burned the world. So I think we need to have a liquor that will make us feel the burn, if you know what I mean. So we're going to take this drink here. It's about 75% alcohol, so this is very flammable. But we're going to put this on top. That's a good amount. Don't want to get too crazy with it because this isn't exactly the easiest to drink. It's almost like gas when you drink it, honestly. Now, that looks pretty amazing, but I think we're gonna have to just punctuate this drink one more time. So for that, we're gonna turn the lights down low. We're gonna set this on fire. There you have it. Now it's kind of hard to see a little bit. It's still burning a little bit there, but that is the shot that burned the world. And I gotta say, it really does remind me of a battlefield, from the the brown grayish hue of the Irish cream that reminds me of the trenches and the mud, to the yellow Chartreuse that reminds me of the mustard gas, which caused so many to have that horrible demise, to the Serbian plum liquor, to the 151 on top, and the sky that's practically on fire. It really is almost a landscape in a shot. And now I think it is time for us to taste. So for that, we're going to put out our flame by covering it. You don't want to blow this out because it will just continue to burn, and you don't want to risk having the alcohol spread out of the drink, because that will be fire flying at you. Imagine like a little napalm coming at you. So make sure that you cover your flame to put it out, and do not blow it out, because that is going to end horribly, because that will continue to burn until the 151 is gone. So now that I've talked too much, let's try it. Woo! Spilled a little bit. Woo! That is definitely the shot that burns. Oh my gosh. But I gotta say too, it is a incredibly unique experience drinking it. The thing with layering your alcohols, you want to make sure that you know the density of the alcohols, and that's important here. So with cream's going to be your heaviest, because it not only has the fat, but it also has the high sugar content. And as you continue to go up higher in alcohol percentages or proofs in your drinks, it's going to be the lighter it is in density. So for our density, it was obviously the most dense was going to be our cream. The next dense was going to be our Chartreuse, which has a lot of sugar in it. And then at 50% alcohol, obviously it was going to be very easy to float our Plum Brandy on top of that. And then at 75% alcohol, it's the easiest to float pretty much in any drink, is the 151. And as you drink that, you can actually taste the different densities as they come down. It's almost like light and airy gaseousness as you start to throw it back, and you get that 151 with that sweet burn. And then it goes to the Serbian plum liquor, which is a little bit heavier, then to the yellow Chartreuse, which is a little bit heavier, but you're getting the herbally flavors. I would say that the Chartreuse probably is the first thing you taste other than alcohol. And then finally you have the cool down effect, but also the heaviest element in the Irish cream. And it's really interesting to taste the weight difference as you go down. But the aftertaste is all plums here. It's really cool to taste. It's delicious, exceptionally unique, and I think certainly would put the world on fire. It put me on fire, that's for sure. And that sounds like last call. Let's talk about that day on June 28th when Archduke Franz Ferdinand met his untimely and tragic demise. The Black Hand had recruited 3 specific people, and the man who was in charge of recruiting them was a man named Vojtin Kosic. And Vojtin Kosic was what was known as a kamataji. He was a guy who was fighting against the Ottomans, specifically in the areas around Bulgaria and Macedonia and around there. And he was dispatched by the Black Hand specifically with the purpose of recruiting new members for the cause. And he found Travko Grabez, Nedjelko Chabrinovic, and Gavrilo Princip, all around the year of 19 years of age, and all of them super into the nationalist feel. All of them also Bosnian Serbs as well. So they particularly had a emotional attachment to Archduke Franz Ferdinand's arrival into Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia at the time of June 28th. Now, Franz Ferdinand's route was published for the people to see. It was essentially a way of him kind of saying, hello, I'm a friendly heir to the throne. I'm going to change things for the better, and I'm going to be a little bit more modern, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit more autonomy too. You know, I'm going to make living under the Austrian Habsburg rule a lot more easy for you guys. But for the Serbians, that wasn't exactly something that they wanted. Specifically, from this book, The Sleepwalkers, which is written by Christopher Clark. It's an excellent book that talks about the tragedies leading up to the World War I, all of the things that went into it. It's an excellent book, but there's one particular statement I want to quote here, right from the source. And he says, "It should be emphasized that the Archduke was not targeted on account of any alleged hostility to the Slavic minorities in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but on the contrary, because, to borrow words of his assassin Gavrilo Princip, quote, as future sovereign, he would have prevented our union by carrying through certain reforms," end quote. Now, that's an important tidbit to know. Archduke Ferdinand was essentially a guy who's like, I'm going to extend a helping hand. I'm going to give you more autonomy. But for the nationalist Serbians, they wanted to break off entirely from the Austro-Hungarians. They didn't want to be comfortable in the Austro-Hungarians. So taking him out was important because he was more dangerous than his father, Franz Joseph, who took up a more hostile route towards the Serbians. And so on that fateful day, one particular assassin, we're not certain of whom, we don't have a name, but he throws a bomb, a grenade, into the motorcade, and it explodes, and it actually misses the Duchess and the Archduke as it goes over their heads. They actually duck to miss it, and it explodes near the crowd, injuring many people. Nobody was killed, but it injured a lot of people, and immediately the motorcade speeds off, and there's a little bit of chaos. Everybody bolts and trying to look for different places to hide, and obviously a terrorist attack had just happened, and Gavrilo Princip, one of the assassins, was so bummed about, the opportunity wasted, the assassination gone awry, that he leaves and he goes back to, I just want some comfort food. He goes to find a good place to have a sandwich, one of his favorite sandwich places in Sarajevo. And meanwhile, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he's hiding out in a secure location away from his attackers, and he's talking to some of his advisors, including the mayor of Sarajevo, trying to figure out, all right, what's the next thing we should do? Some people are saying you should stay, on guard and stay in the bunker and make sure that you're not going to be attacked. Well, others were like, well, maybe we make a public appearance. And Archduke Franz Ferdinand said, I am going to do probably the best thing to show these people that I am going to be the best monarch that they're going to have. And he says, I'm going to go to all of the hospitals where the people who are injured as a result of the attack on my life, and I'm going to pay them a visit, and I'm going to assure them that I am looking out for their good health. And so him and his wife get into the car with their driver, who, by the way, is Austrian. Now, this is an important tidbit. Why? Because he doesn't know the streets of Sarajevo all that much. So on his drive towards the hospitals, he's not really knowing where he's going. He kind of gets lost. And where does he end up? Right in front of the sandwich shop where Gavrilo Princip is eating his sandwich. And Princip is just sitting there, having his lunch, feeling a little down on himself. Obviously, the great assassination didn't go through. And then he looks up and he goes, holy crap, it's the Archduke. And without taking a second thought, he pulls out his gun, fires 2 shots. Bang, bang. And he hits both Duchess Sophie and the Archduke. And as the Archduke lays back into his chair, he goes, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, as he bleeds out to death. And Gavrilo Princip is taken into custody along with a couple other conspirators as well. And that is the incredible moment in which a plan going awry turns out to work out in the favor of the assassins later, simply because somebody got lost and the Archduke had a big heart. And unfortunately, that big heart made up for a big target for Gavrilo Princip, and he ended his life, and the world, as a result, descended into chaos and war. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're interested in any of our other historically inspired cocktails, you can find them here, or you can find them at topshelfhistory.com. There we also have all of our blogs, videos, deep dives, recipes, and more from all of us here at Top Shelf History. Remember, history is better with a drink. Cheers.